There is a number in football this summer that should not exist. 6. No man has ever played 6 World Cups. The tournament is a 20-year span at the outside, a career's full arc compressed into 5 attempts, and almost nobody gets 5. Lothar Matthäus got 5. Ronaldo, the Portuguese one, got 5, and is spending this same summer, one bracket half away, turning 5 into 6 as well. Because of course the two of them would do this in the same June. But only one man arrived at his 6th World Cup as the reigning world champion. Only one arrived at 39, having already completed the greatest story the sport has ever told, and then declined to stop telling it. And only one, 3 weeks ago in a group stage match in this tournament, rolled a finish inside a far post and quietly took sole possession of the last record he did not own, the most World Cup goals ever scored by any man. 13. The summit of the tournament Pelé built, Müller stocked, and Klose guarded for a generation, now held by a 5'7" Argentine grandfather aged forward who was told, at 11 years old, that his body would not grow without injections his family could not afford. This film is the full accounting. The clinic in Rosario and the napkin in Barcelona, the apprenticeship under Ronaldinho and the empire under Guardiola. The style, examined forensically, frame by frame, because no player has ever been measured this thoroughly, and the measurements still read like typos. The burden of Argentina, 4 lost finals, a retirement that lasted 49 days, and the redemption arc that ended at the Maracanã and Lusail. The rivalry that split a planet, the exile, the burofax, Paris, Miami. Every record that matters, every moment you remember, and the question underneath all of it, what, exactly, did football just live through? Settle in. This is the longest career in the sport's history to stay this good for this long. And it deserves the longest look. Rosario, Argentina. A river port city of 1 million people 3 hours up the Paraná from Buenos Aires, birthplace of Che Guevara, the Argentine flag, and an argument that will outlive everyone watching this film. Lionel Andres Messi was born there on the 24th of June, 1987. The third of 4 children of Jorge, a steel factory supervisor, and Celia, who worked in a magnet workshop, working class, tight, football mad, the standard Argentine grammar. The mythology begins immediately, and unusually for mythology, the witnesses corroborate it. He barely spoke. He was tiny. And from the moment his grandmother Celia, the person he would spend the rest of his life pointing to the sky for, dragged the 4-year-old to fill out a short-handed kids' team, adults began behaving strangely around him. At Grandally, the neighborhood club, parents of opposing children applauded him. At Newell's Old Boys, where he arrived at 6, his youth team lost so rarely they were called the Machine of 87, and the club would send the tiny number 10 out at halftime of first-team matches to entertain the stadium with keepy-uppies for coins thrown from the stands. Coaches from that era tell the same story in the same slightly haunted tone. They had seen good kids before. This was a different phenomenon category. Then, at 10, the plot's first villain, and it was biology. A growth hormone deficiency. The boy, who was already the smallest on every pitch, had effectively stopped growing. Treatment existed, nightly injections, which the child learned to administer himself, alternating legs, at a cost of nearly $1,000 a month. For a steel worker's family in the Argentina of the late 90s, sliding toward the 2001 economic collapse, the arithmetic was impossible. Jorge's health insurance covered it for a time. The insurance ran out. Newell's promised help and delivered trivia. River Plate sniffed, admired, and balked at the medical bill. In the country that worships football above all institutions, the best 11-year-old anyone had ever seen could not find an Argentine institution willing to pay for him to reach 12 at full size. Hold that image, because the entire dossier grows from it. The shyness that never left him. The family-run career, Jorge as manager for life, built on the memory of institutions that failed them. The strange, decades-long ache between Messi and Argentina itself, the country that loved him last and hardest, and 500 miles of ocean away, a Catalan club with a famous youth academy, a first-team director named Carles Rexach, and a sporting culture about to make the best transfer decision in the history of professional sport for the price of a growth hormone prescription. The family flew to Barcelona in September 2000. The boy was 13 and about to be signed on a napkin. The story is so famous, it has calcified into legend. So, let us restore its actual texture, because the details are better than the myth. The trial itself took minutes to become folklore. Barcelona's academy staff watched a 13-year-old who came up to the other boy's shoulders, receive the ball, and simply refused to surrender it. First-team director Carles Rexach, arriving late to the session, would say he needed one lap of the pitch to make up his mind. The problem was never the football. The problem was that signing a 13-year-old foreigner, with no Spanish club history, requiring the relocation of an entire family and a monthly medical bill, was, by the club's cautious internal logic, madness. The negotiations dragged for months while the Messes waited in limbo, and Jorge, patience gone, delivered an ultimatum: decide or we go home. So on the 14th of December 2000, at a tennis club lunch, with no contract paper available and the family's agent pressing, Rexach grabbed the only writing surface on the table. On a paper napkin, he committed FC Barcelona, under my responsibility and despite some opinions against it, to sign Lionel Messi, provided the agreed conditions were met. A napkin, the founding document of modern football's greatest career, is a piece of catering equipment, and it now resides, framed like the relic it is, in a museum, having been valued at auction in the millions. The formal contracts followed. The family moved. Barcelona paid the medical treatment that Argentina's institutions would not. What followed was the hard, unglamorous chapter the montages skip. The family split under the strain. Celia and the other children returned to Rosario. Lionel stayed with Jorge, a teenager alone with his father in a foreign apartment, so homesick that teammates from that era describe a boy who cried quietly and said almost nothing for a year. Bureaucracy caged him. Federation rules over foreign minors meant months at a time when he could barely play competitive matches. The best young footballer alive, training in near anonymity while paperwork moved. And at La Masia, the farmhouse academy beside the stadium, the education compounded daily anyway. The rondos, the positional grammar, the Cruyffian catechism. Pass and move, protect the ball, the game is played with the head. Grafted onto a dribbling instinct that was already, coaches admitted, unteachable in both directions. They could not have taught it. They dared not touch it. By 2003, the machine inside the academy had run out of levels for him. He famously blitzed through multiple youth categories in a single season. In November of that year, aged 16, he trained with the first team for a friendly against Porto, coached by a rising Portuguese ego named José Mourinho, and left the pitch with senior professionals asking who, exactly, that was. In the dressing room, the answer was already circulating, delivered by the smiling Brazilians who ruled it. Ronaldinho, the best player in the world, had adopted the silent kid from Rosario and was telling anyone who would listen something the world would need 3 more years to believe that the boy would be better than him. 16th of October 2004. A Catalan derby against Espanyol, and a 17-year-old with a bowl cut replaces Deco in the 82nd minute. The third youngest debutant in the club's history to that point. Nobody outside the building fully registered it. The building itself had registered everything. Frank Rijkaard's Barcelona was mid-resurrection. The Galactico-era Madrid hegemony about to be broken by a team built on Ronaldinho's joy. And inside its training ground, the apprenticeship now unfolding has no real parallel in sport. The world's best player personally sponsoring his own successor. Ronaldinho gave the teenager his protection, his friendship, and, on the 1st of May 2005, his assist, a scooped pass that Messi, on as a substitute against Albacete, lifted over the goalkeeper with a delicacy that became instantly emblematic. First senior goal, youngest league scorer in club history at that time. And Ronaldinho celebrated by carrying the boy on his back, an image the sport has never been able to stop reading as prophecy. The king laughing, carrying his own succession. The 2 seasons that followed were a controlled detonation. The 2005 FIFA World Youth Championship. Argentina champions. Messi the tournament's best player and top scorer. The moment Argentina at large discovered what Barcelona had been hiding. A senior Argentina debut that same August, 63 seconds long and ended by a red card for an elbow he took rather than gave. An omen of the complicated marriage ahead. A new Barcelona contract, then another, the release clauses climbing like altitude markings, and in February 2006, the night the connoisseurs still cite. A Champions League knockout first leg at Stamford Bridge, where an 18-year-old tormented Mourinho's champion Chelsea so thoroughly that the England international marking him was sent off from sheer accumulated fouling. Barcelona won the tie, and that May, the Champions League final in Paris. Messi watched that final in a suit. A hamstring had ended his season in March, and Ricard chose not to risk him. He did not consider himself a champion. He barely celebrated. File the reaction. The standards were already set at a level the outside world hadn't conceived of yet. Within 18 months, the smiling king's own light began to fade. Ronaldinho's decline, when it came fast and at night. And by the summer of 2008, Barcelona sold the greatest entertainer of his generation, handed his number 10 shirt to the quiet Argentine, and appointed as coach a former academy captain with 0 top-flight experience, and a plan the sport would spend the next decade recovering from. Pep Guardiola, and the detonation stopped being controlled. Before Guardiola, 2 years of individual ascent inside collective drift, and 1 goal that requires this film to stop and simply watch. April the 18th, 2007. Copa del Rey semifinal against Getafe. Messi, 19, receives the ball on the right touchline, inside his own half, with his back half turned. What follows lasts 12 seconds and covers 60 meters, 2 touches to escape the first pair of markers, a straight line gallop past the third, a swerve inside the fourth at the edge of the box, the goalkeeper unbalanced and passed, and a finish angled home while a 5th defender arrives too late, with television commentary dissolving into the only comparison available. Because Argentina already owned this exact goal. Diego Maradona had scored it, nearly step for step, against England at the 1986 World Cup, the greatest goal in World Cup history. A 19-year-old had reproduced the sport's untouchable masterpiece in real time against professionals, 41 days short of the original's 21st anniversary. That season also produced a Classico hat trick at the Camp Nou, the last of the 3 in stoppage time, dragging a 9-man adjacent Barcelona level, and against Espanyol, a goal punched in with his hand, which Argentine media reported with something like genealogical pride. The Maradona comparisons were no longer journalism, they were taxonomy. Then Guardiola arrived, and with him the 2 structural decisions that built the summit. First, the culture, the new coach's discipline, punctuality, diet, professionalism, landed on a 21-year-old Messi at the exact moment his own ambition demanded it. The fitness transformation of 2008 is the least discussed pivot in his career, and among the most important, because the injuries that had punctuated his teens essentially stopped. Second, the promise. Barcelona initially resisted releasing him for the 2008 Beijing Olympics. Guardiola, against club lawyers' momentum, backed the player's wish. Messi went, won Olympic gold with Argentina, and returned owing his new coach the thing no contract can buy, total buy-in. The 2008-09 season that followed remains one of the best any club team has ever played. Messi from the right wing, Eto'o through the middle, Henry from the left, Xavi and Iniesta conducting, and in May, 3 summits in 3 weeks. the Copa, the League, and the Champions League final in Rome against holders Manchester United, where, with the score at 1-0, the smallest man on the pitch rose at the far post and headed in the second, his boot falling off in the act, the header looping over Van der Sar like a piece of theater blocking. Barcelona became the first Spanish treble winners. By December, with the Club World Cup and both Super Cups collected, they held 6 trophies from 6 competitions. The sextuple, never done before, never done since. Messi, 22, collected his first Ballon d'Or by the widest voting margin in the award's history to that point. It should have been the peak. It was the base camp. Every scientific field has its Copernican moment, the reframing after which the old maps look naive. Footballs happened in a hotel meeting the night before a Clasico in May 2009, when Guardiola called a 21-year-old to his room to show him a plan. Start on the right wing as always. Then, when the signal came, abandon the position entirely and move into the center. Not as a striker. As a striker who leaves. The false 9 was not new. The historians point to Hungary in the 50s, to earlier ghosts. But its Messi addition became the most devastating tactical redeployment in the modern game, and the mechanics deserve a full minute. When Messi vacated the center-forward slot and dropped between the lines, opposing center-backs faced a decision theory nightmare. Follow him into midfield, and the space behind them opened for Henry and Eto'o's diagonal runs. Refuse to follow, and the best player alive received the ball facing goal in the pocket that playmakers call home, with the game's best midfield triangle recycling every loose end. Madrid encountered it first, cold, 2-6, at the Bernabeu, Messi scoring twice from the phantom center. 18 months later, in November 2010, the mechanism's mature edition beat Mourinho's Madrid 5-0 in a match Spanish football still calls La Manita, the little hand. The false 9 turned Messi from the world's best winger into the sport's central organizing fact, and the trophies compounded accordingly. Leagues in procession, and above them the 2 Wembley and Rome book-ended Champions League finals against Manchester United, 2009 and 2011. That framed the Guardiola dynasty. The 2011 final is the era's exhibition piece, a 3-1 dismantling so complete that Alex Ferguson, the defeated manager, called that Barcelona the best team he had ever faced, and Messi's rising drive from the top of the box its signature. Around these summits, the individual measurements simply left the atlas. 4 consecutive Ballons d'Or, 2009 through 2012. No one had ever won more than 3 in total. The 50-goal league season. The 73-goal club season across all competitions in 2011-12. And in the calendar year 2012, the number that still reads like a data entry error. 91 goals, club and country combined, breaking Gerd Müller's 40-year-old record for goals in a calendar year, a mark that had been considered decorative, like the land speed record, until someone drove past it. One night from that stretch stands as the era's thesis statement. March 2012, Champions League against Bayer Leverkusen. 5 goals in one match, the first 5-goal night in the competition's modern history. Asked afterward to explain him, Guardiola had already given the only answer that survived the era. Don't write about him. Don't try to describe him. Watch him. Pause the biography. For 2 chapters, this film does what Guardiola advised. It watches him, because how is the dossier's real cargo, and the how has been studied by sports scientists, data departments, and heartbroken defenders for 20 years. Their findings assembled. Begin with the body, since the body was the original problem. 5'7", low slung, thighs like a track cyclist. The growth deficiency that nearly ended the story became, the biomechanists argue, its foundation. A lower center of gravity permits lean angles and reacceleration that taller frames cannot survive. Messi's turning radius at speed has been measured as functionally the tightest in the sport's recorded era. Add the stride signature, shorter, faster steps than any comparable dribbler, meaning more ground contacts per second. meaning more moments per second at which direction can change. Defenders describe the practical result identically across 2 decades. You cannot commit because he has already banked your commitment, and you cannot wait because waiting concedes the shooting pocket. There is no correct answer. That is not a metaphor. Opposition analysts have said it in exactly those words. Then the touch. Messi at full sprint keeps the ball within a boot's length per contact. The famous observation that the ball seems tied to him is, on the tracking data, close to literal. His touch spacing while dribbling is the tightest ever measured at elite speed. The consequence is strategic, not aesthetic. Because the ball never leaves his radius, there is no interception window. So the only legal resort is the tackle, into feet that are no longer where they were. Hence the fouling statistics of his peak years, which resemble weather data, and hence the eerie balance. Watch the montages, and notice how rarely he goes down until physics insists. The left foot deserves its own paragraph as the most productive limb in the history of the sport. Nominally one-footed, his right is a fine supporting actor. His headers rare enough to be celebrated like comets. He built the most unstoppable repeated action in football around that supposed limitation. The diagonal drift from the right half space onto the left foot and the curled finish to the far corner. Goalkeepers have known it was coming since 2006. It has been scored in recognizable form several hundred times. The sport's entire analytics movement, asked to name the single most valuable recurring event in its datasets, lands on some version of that shot. Knowing is not stopping. The release point arrives a quarter second before the goalkeeper's set position, from angles the geometry textbooks call closed. And underneath everything, the attribute his teammates rank first and cameras rank last, the scanning. Messi's characteristic walking. He covers less ground than almost any elite forward. A statistic once read as indolence has been reinterpreted by a decade of research as continuous reconnaissance. Strolling through the opponent's shape in the opening minutes, mapping which center back hesitates, which pivot fails to check his shoulder, banking the map and caching it after the hour when legs and structures loosen. The walking is the working. The sport's most explosive event was, all along, its most premeditated. The deeper marvel is that Messi names not one player, but a succession of 5, each engineered as the previous one's physical prime expired. No elite career has ever reversioned itself this many times at the top. Walk the editions. Edition 1, 2005 to 2009. The touchline winger. Pure vertical dribbling from the right chalk. A Maradona tribute act with better teammates. Beat the fullback outside or cut in and shoot. The Getafe goal is this player's monument. Edition 2, 2009 to 2013. The False 9, the Copernican edition, dissected last chapter. Peak goal output, peak team dominance, the 91-goal year, football reorganized around his gravity. Edition 3, roughly 2013 to 2017. The right half space 10. As the first sprinting yards shortened and Luis Enrique's Barcelona added Suarez and Neymar, Messi migrated back toward the right and downward into creation. The trident's brain rather than only its blade. This edition's signature is the assist, the outside of the boot slide rule pass, the lofted diagonal to Alba arriving like scheduled freight. The playmaking numbers of these seasons match the greatest pure creators ever recorded, attached to 30-goal floors. Edition 4, 2017 to 2021, the deep conductor. In the decaying Barcelona of the late era, he became at times functionally a midfielder who finished, collecting from center backs, orchestrating through the thirds, then arriving, rather than residing, in the box. The free kick mastery peaked here too, a skill he acquired almost from scratch in his mid-20s, and finished among the handful of best ever. Another quiet falsification of the born-not-made reading of him. And Edition 5, 2021 to now. The tournament forward, the Argentina and Miami version. Pressing duties delegated by collective agreement, involvement rationed with actuarial precision. The walking now covering entire halves, and the decisive contributions per minute somehow undiminished. As Qatar proved to the whole watching planet, and as this month's World Cup, 13 goals deep into history, keeps proving, the fifth edition is the style's final argument. Strip away the sprinting, the volume, even the burst, and what remains, the scanning, the touch, the left foot, the map, is still enough to decide World Cups. 5 players, 1 career, 0 interruptions at the summit. The tactical historian's consensus has hardened around a sentence this film adopts. Others changed matches. Messi, 3 separate times, changed what the best player in the world was understood to be. Empire's age, even his. The post-Guardiola interregnum. Coaching churn, a tax case cloud, the first serious injuries in years, and a Bayern semi-final demolition that ended the first dynasty with prejudice, gave the skeptics their opening. The response, when it came, arrived speaking Spanish, Portuguese, and profanity. The front line of Messi, Luis Suarez, and Neymar. MSN. The Trident's 2014-15 season is the second summit of the club career. 122 goals among the 3 of them. The most any forward line had ever produced. Attached to a rebuilt midfield spine, and a fully mature addition. 3 Messi orchestrating from the right. The season's crescendo lives in 2 frames. First, the Champions League semi-final against Bayern, now coached, in the era's best subplot, by Guardiola himself. In the closing minutes at the Camp Nou, Messi feinted Jerome Boateng, a reigning world champion defender, into sitting down on the turf, then chipped Manuel Neuer, the world's best goalkeeper, with a touch of almost insulting softness. The image of Boateng on the grass became the internet's shorthand for what this player does to elite professionals. Second, the final in Berlin against Juventus, won 3-1, completing Barcelona's second treble, the club's 5th European Cup, and the Trident's coronation. The seasons around it stacked the ledger into absurdity. Domestic doubles, the all-time La Liga scoring record, Telmo Zarra's mark, standing since the 50s, passed in 2014 with a hat-trick, naturally. The all-time Clásico scoring record, the 500th Barcelona goal, scored, the scriptwriters insisted, in the final seconds at the Bernabeu in 2017, celebrated by holding his shirt up to the enemy stand. Name and number displayed to the whistling cathedral, like a signature on a completed painting. Even the era's losses were epic. The 2017 Paris comeback, 6-1. The greatest single-night reversal in Champions League history, Messi conducting the storm. Then, in August 2017, the Empire's load-bearing wall left. Neymar to Paris for $222 million, the transfer that broke football's economy, and quietly, Barcelona's succession plan. The club's response, $500 million spent on replacements history remembers unkindly, began the financial rot the dossier will reach in Chapter 12. On the pitch, Messi simply annexed more of the job. The late Barcelona years are statistically among his richest. 6 European golden shoes by the end. Top scorer and top assister in the same seasons. A one-man competitive floor under a decaying institution. The 2019 Ballon d'Or, his 6th, was won essentially alone. But this film has been delaying something, and the delay ends now. Because through every one of these Camp Nou summers ran the wound that defined the man more than any trophy, the sky blue and white one. A career this long is also a history of its management, and the file of Messi's coaches doubles as a management textbook on the hardest problem in professional sport. What do you do when your employee is the best there has ever been? Frank Rijkaard's answer was patience, the protective rationing of a teenager's minutes, and the wisdom, which Messi has publicly credited ever since, of never coaching the dribble out of him. Pep Guardiola's answer was architecture, the only coach who ever redesigned the entire machine around the asset's maximum. And the 4 years this film has already crowned as the summit. Their relationship, obsessive, occasionally strained by its own intensity, mutually career-defining, set the standard every successor was doomed to be measured against. Tito Villanova's tragic, brief tenure produced the emotional interregnum, the 100-point league season, and Messi's grief at a mentor's death, Tata Martino began the awkward experiments. Luis Enrique's tenure opened with a genuine Cold War, a January of dropped selection, training ground frost and transfer rumors that had Manchester's clubs on alert, and resolved into the second treble partnership. Proof that with this player, confrontation could work only when followed by concession. Enrique's Barcelona gave Messi the right-side freedom that built the MSN edition. Valverde and Setien managed the decline of everything around him. The Rome and Anfield collapses filed under their names, fairly or not. Ronald Koeman inherited the Burofax winter, benched no one's illusions, and presided over the ending. The national team file inverts the lesson. Argentina's parade of star coaches, including Maradona himself, tried for a decade to bolt the Barcelona Messi onto squads built by federation politics, and failed. The answer, when it came from the least famous name on the list, Lionel Scaloni, the interim nobody, whose genius was the removal of every premise. No Galactico system, no Barcelona cosplay, no demand that Messi press or carry or be 25. Scaloni built a young team whose explicit tactical foundation was service to Edition 5, and won everything there is. He is now, by trophies, the most successful coach in the history of Argentine national football, and the final proof of the textbook's one-line conclusion. The coaches who succeeded with Messi were the ones who understood they worked for the phenomenon, not the reverse, and that the phenomenon, handled with honesty, repaid them with their own immortality. No one this famous has ever been this private, and the privacy was not an accident. It was infrastructure, built by a small permanent caste. This dossier owes its own chapter. The footballing brotherhood first. Xavi and Iniesta were the career's central enablers, the two midfielders whose geometry manufactured the conditions of every peak-era chapter, a symbiosis so complete that all three have described knowing each other's next touch without looking. Dani Alves, the career's most prolific assist partnership, and later Jordi Alba ran the flanks that his diagonals fed for a decade. Busquets swept behind all of it, then followed him to Miami. And Luis Suarez became something rarer than a strike partner, the actual best friend. Neighboring houses, intertwined families, the barbecues of Castelldefel's folklore, whose arrival in 2014 coincided, not coincidentally, with the loosest and happiest stretch of the Barcelona years, and whose reunion in pink two continents, later, says everything about what the inner circle is for. Then the home front, which the sport's most reserved superstar has always identified as the actual foundation. Antonella Roccuzzo, Rosario-born, the cousin of a childhood teammate, known to him since they were children, is the career's through line. The long-distance years, the 2017 wedding in Rosario that functioned as a football summit, 3 sons raised between Barcelona, Paris, and Miami whose stadium reactions have become their own genre of broadcast footage. The Rosario anchoring is the pattern's point. The wife from home, the childhood friends retained for decades, the family compound logic of every city he has lived in. A life engineered deliberately to keep the fame outside the walls. And the first circle's first member, gone before any of it. Grandmother Celia, who insisted a 4-year-old be allowed to play with the big kids, who never saw a single professional match. Every goal, all 800 plus, has ended the same way for 20 years. 2 hands raised, index fingers to the sky. The sport's most repeated celebration is a private correspondence conducted in public. 800 letters deep, that is the Brotherhood's real organizational chart. The quiet at the center of the loudest career ever lived, maintained by the same dozen people, from the first chapter to whatever the last one turns out to be. An honest dossier includes the file the montages omit, the off-pitch reckonings and what they reveal about the man's one consistent public strategy: silence at almost any price. The heaviest entry is the tax case. In 2016, a Barcelona court convicted Messi and his father on counts of tax fraud concerning image rights structures routed through offshore companies during his early career. A 21-month sentence suspended per Spanish practice for nonviolent first offenses, plus substantial fines. The defense's core claim that the player signed what he was told to sign and understood nothing of the architecture persuaded no judge, and the episode remains the career's gravest formal stain. Its aftermath reshaped the family operation, settlements, restructured affairs, and a lasting Argentine grievance that the country's establishment had, once again, treated its greatest export as a target. The case landing with cruel timing, weeks after the 2016 Copa resignation. The second file is the leak wars. The late Barcelona years turned the club's own institutions against its icon. The contract details published in the press, framing history's best-paid athlete as the cause of institutional collapse rather than its last revenue engine, and the scandal in which club leadership was accused of contracting social media operations that, among other targets, disparaged its own captain. The episodes explain the Burofax chapter's temperature better than any tactical analysis. The exit was not about football or money. It was about an institution that had begun briefing against the family, that had given it 2 decades. And the third file is the strategy itself. Across all of it, convictions, leaks, the annual media referenda on his leadership, his celebrations, his walking. The response was a silence so total it became the brand. No crisis interviews, no memoir score settling. Feuds conducted, if at all, through a single sentence dropped once and never repeated. The bill for that strategy was real. For years, the silence was itself prosecuted as coldness, arrogance, absence of leadership. The dividend arrived late but in full, when the Netherlands night and the Qatar arc revealed what the silence had been storing, and a planet that had spent 2 decades reading blankness discovered it had been reading restraint. The lesson the media training industry now teaches from his file: silence is a position, and held long enough, it appreciates. To understand Argentina's story, start with its cruel structural joke. The country that produced him never got to raise him. He left at 13. His football grew up Catalan. And when the finished product returned wearing the 10, Argentina looked at the sport's greatest player and saw, for a decade, a stranger with a Spanish accent in Maradona's shirt. The early file reads like a misunderstanding compounding annually. The 63-second debut in Red Card 2005. The 2006 World Cup, 18 years old. Electric in a group stage cameo, a goal, an assist, the tournament's youngest scorer. Then left on the bench for the entire quarterfinal against Germany, watching Argentina go out on penalties. The 2007 Copa America, a final reached and lost to Brazil. Beijing 2008 delivered gold and a genuine national smile. Then the seniors resumed losing. The 2010 World Cup put the myth and the air in one dugout. Maradona as coach, Messi as conductor, chemistry warm, structure non-existent. Germany again, 4-0 in the quarterfinal. Messi left South Africa with 0 goals and a nation's verdict hardening into the phrase that tracked him for years: no siente la camiseta. He doesn't feel the shirt. The verdict was always sociologically neat and evidentially bankrupt. Teammates from every era described the pre-match vomiting from nerves, the private devastation after exits. But it had a real anchor. With Barcelona, he was from another planet. With Argentina, he was merely the best player on a badly built team, and the gap read, from the terraces, as withheld love. The comparison underneath was explicit. Maradona had dragged an ordinary squad to a World Cup essentially alone in 1986. That, Argentina decided, was the entry fee for sainthood. Anything less was evidence for the prosecution. By 2011, a home Copa America quarterfinal exit whistled in his own country. The relationship had found its terrible equilibrium. The more he won in Europe, the larger the Argentine debt grew. What no one knew was that the file's darkest 4 years were still ahead, and that they contained, in sequence, the closest near miss in World Cup history, 2 more lost finals, a resignation letter, and the beginning, invisible at the time, of the greatest redemption arc in the history of sport. Brazil 2014. The best team Argentina had given him: Di Maria, Higuaín, Agüero, Mascherano's snarling prime, and Messi carried the group stage on his back. 4 goals, match after match decided by his interventions. The country's skepticism visibly thawing with each one. Through the knockouts, the goals dried, but the team held. And on the 13th of July at the Maracanã, Brazil's cathedral, of all buildings, Argentina played Germany for the World Cup. You know the images. Higuaín's early chance dragged wide of an open invitation. Palacios' chip, wide. Messi's own half chance in the second half, wide by a boot's width. Götz's extra-time volley for Germany. And then the walk, the slow, hollow-eyed procession past the World Cup trophy on its plinth to collect the tournament's golden ball, an award that felt, in the moment, like a taunt. He looked at the trophy as he passed. The photograph of that glance is among the most parsed images in sports history. Closer than Maradona's heir had ever come, close enough to touch, and the debt suddenly larger than ever. What followed turned wound into pattern. Copa America 2015, in Chile. Final reached, penalties, Messi scored his kick, it didn't matter. Copa America Centenario 2016, a tournament of Imperial Messi form, including the free kick against the United States that broke Batistuta's all-time Argentina scoring record. Then the final, Chile again, penalties again. This time, his kick sailed over the bar. And that night, 29 years old, 4 international finals lost, a federation in administrative chaos around him. He stood in a stadium corridor and resigned. The national team is over for me, it's not for me. The retirement of Lionel Messi from Argentina duty was announced by Messi himself in the mixed zone in the past tense. It lasted 49 days. Days in which the country that had spent a decade prosecuting him staged a mass conversion. Murals, marches, the president on the phone, children's letters, a campaign with a single slogan: "No te vayas, Leo. Don't go." Argentina, faced with the actual void, discovered what it had. He returned in August with a sentence that quietly reframed everything. He loved his country too much to leave it like this. The remaining years of the old cycle were purgatorial but load-bearing. A qualifying campaign rescued single-handedly the 2017 hat-trick in the altitude of Quito that dragged Argentina to Russia is, per teammates, the night the dressing room stopped debating who the shirt belonged to. And a 2018 World Cup of chaos, one last Kazan classic lost to France, and an ending that felt once more like the end. It wasn't. Somewhere in the wreckage of Russia, a federation finally stopped asking Messi to be Maradona and hired a quiet coach named Lionel Scaloni to build, for the first time in the entire file, a team designed around what Messi actually was. The redemption arc had begun. But before this film walks it, the dossier owes a chapter to the other name that defined these same 15 years. The shadow, the mirror, the engine. No account of this career is complete without the man who spent 15 years making it impossible to relax at the summit, and whose own 6th World Cup, this same month, one bracket away, gives this chapter its strange present tense. The facts of the rivalry first, because they are unrepeatable. From 2008 to 2017, Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo won 10 consecutive Ballons d'Or between them. A duopoly with no precedent and no plausible sequel. For 9 of those years, they shared one league and one fixture. Messi's Barcelona against Ronaldo's Real Madrid was, by broadcast reach, the biggest recurring event in the sport, and the two of them turned the Clásico into a private scoring correspondence, records traded monthly. Hat tricks answered with hat tricks. 50-goal seasons normalized into a shared madness. Statisticians have called the 2011 to 2015 stretch the most intense sustained peak duel in the history of individual sport, and the claim survives scrutiny. Each man, by pre-2008 standards, was having the greatest career ever. Each was, at all times, second in his own era by somebody's reckoning. The pairing worked on the imagination because the contrast was almost lazily perfect. The self-made against the heaven-sent. Ronaldo's physique and finishing built in the gym rep by rep, documented and narrated. Messi's gifts arriving as if pre-installed, the work hidden behind the shrug. The extrovert and the introvert, the brand and the mumble, the athlete who conquered 3 leagues by design against the one-club organism, who had to be evicted by financial collapse. Football's oldest aesthetic argument, is greatness made or born, willed or bestowed, got 15 years of weekly evidence and assigned each thesis a face. Entire friendships ended over it. It remains the internet's longest-running sports war, and the first question asked in every language's football conversation. What the war obscured, the principles never did. The respect was real and the engine mutual. Both have said versions of the same sentence. The other made me better, made me hungrier, kept the standard impossible. Ronaldo's 5 Champions Leagues to Messi's 4. Messi's 8 Ballons d'Or to Ronaldo's 5. Ronaldo's international goal record against Messi's World Cup. The ledger never settles, which was always its gift. The argument is the monument, and history has added its coda gently. The famous photograph before Qatar, the 2 of them over a chessboard, an advertisement that became an era's portrait, reads now as the summit conference it was since then. Messi's crown in Qatar, Ronaldo's records in the desert, and this improbable shared June in America. 39 and 41, 6th World Cups apiece, both scoring, both alive in the bracket as this film assembles. The sport has never had a rivalry like it, and everything about modern football's economics, media, and talent distribution says it never will again. The mirror abroad was Ronaldo. The ghost at home was always larger, because the ghost was family. Argentina's internal debate was never really Messi versus Maradona as a skills comparison. It was a theological dispute about what a national hero owes. Diego was Argentina's wound made flesh, the slum kid who stayed long enough to be adored, who dragged an average squad to the 1986 World Cup virtually alone, the hand of God and the goal of the century in one quarterfinal. Sin and miracle 4 minutes apart against England, of all opponents, 4 years after a war. He was excess, defiance, class revenge, Argentine's self-image with a ball. Messi, the immigrant prodigy with the Catalan education and the measured voice, offered the opposite covenant. Perfection without theater, delivered from abroad. For 2 decades, the country compared not their footage but their mythologies, and Messi's was foreign-made. That, more than any lost final, was the true content of No Siente la Camiseta. The relationship between the 2 men resists the rivalry frame entirely. Diego anointed him early and repeatedly. My successor, he said. Before the boy was 20, handed him the 10 as national coach in the imperfect 2010 partnership, and defended him through every Argentine prosecution. Messi's reverence ran the other direction his whole life, and the timeline gave their story its cruel poetry. Maradona died in November 2020. The pandemic winter of the Burofax, the career's lowest terrace, and 4 days later, Messi scored for Barcelona and pulled off his shirt to reveal a Newell's Old Boys jersey. Maradona's number 10 from Diego's brief, beloved Rosario spell. The private club of their shared origins invoked as public mourning. The stadium and a grieving country understood the grammar instantly. Then Qatar settled the theology in the only currency it accepted. The 2022 run was, beat for beat, the Maradona script, the early stumble, the captain dragging a nation through knockout rounds, the final one as protagonist, performed at 35, and Argentina experienced it explicitly as succession. The murals now paint them together, Diego's arm around Leo's shoulders, the wound and the cure sharing a wall. The debate did not end so much as dissolve into inheritance. Argentina, which spent 20 years demanding its Messi be Maradona, got something rarer. A second, different miracle, and finally noticed it had been watching one all along. Every epic requires its fall, and this one arrived with bureaucratic stationery. The stage was a Barcelona rotting from the boardroom down. The post-Neymar half-billion squandered, wages metastasizing, a presidency lurching between vanity projects, and on the pitch an aging squad held upright by one man's output. The humiliation sequence escalated annually. Rome, Anfield, and then, in the empty stadium August of 2020, the apocalypse, 2-8, against Bayern Munich, in a Champions League quarterfinal. The worst defeat of Messi's career, and the moment his patience, institutional, total 17 years deep, snapped. That month he informed the club he was leaving, delivering the notice via Burofax, the Spanish registered fax service. Instantly the most famous piece of office equipment in sports history. The club's response was to hide behind a release clause and a technicality of dates. The player's counter was the interview in which the quietest superstar alive said the unsayable. The club had no project. He had wanted out, and he would not drag Barcelona to court because it was the club of his life. He stayed a final season under protest, and, being Messi, won the Copa del Rey with a man-of-the-match final, and finished as La Liga's top scorer, while his employer's finances curdled toward insolvency. The actual ending, when it came in August 2021, managed to shock a world that had watched it approach for a year. A new contract was agreed. 5 years, a 50% pay cut, terms settled. The player wanted to stay. What intervened was arithmetic. La Liga's salary cap rules met Barcelona's debt, north of €1 billion, and the sums simply did not close. The club that had signed him on a napkin, because money was no object, could not register him at half price because money was now the only object. The farewell press conference remains among the rawest footage of any athlete's career. Messi weeping before the first question, his wife's handkerchief, the sentence, "I did everything possible to stay," and, most quietly devastating, the admission that his family had never seriously packed for anywhere else. Paris caught him. The two Saint-Germain seasons, Neymar and Mbappé alongside, an unprecedented forward line on paper, belong in the ledger with asterisks in both directions. Trophies, yes, 2 French titles, and the 7th Ballon d'Or, arriving off the back of what came earlier in 2021. Personally, an alienation he later described openly, whistled by his own stands as the club's Champions League obsessions curdled, unhappy, unmoored, and, for the first time since the age of 13, employed somewhere that did not feel like his. History will record the Paris exile chiefly as an incubation chamber, because between those 2 gray club seasons, wearing sky blue and white, the man completed the 2 greatest summers of his life, and the next 2 chapters hold them. The redemption arc began, as good ones do, in humility nobody televised. After Russia 2018, Argentine football finally performed its structural surrender. No more Galactico coaches, no more asking the greatest player alive to compensate for a federation. Lionel Scaloni, a former utility player, an interim appointment mocked across the continent's media, built with patience and no reputation to protect, the thing 17 years of stars had never provided. A young, hungry, tactically humble team whose entire premise was service. De Paul to fight, Paredes to pass, Romero to defend, the Fideo Di Maria for the big nights, Emiliano Martinez, a goalkeeper with a penalty shootout god complex, behind them, and around Messi not deference, but something the man himself had never had in blue and white, friends. The mate-sharing, TikTok-era intimacy of that dressing room is not color commentary. Every insider account marks it as the mechanism. The 2019 Copa, a semifinal exit, a suspension for calling out the Confederation's refereeing, read as more purgatory. It wasn't, it was the group's forging. And in July 2021, in the strange emptiness of pandemic Brazil, the account came due. Argentina reached the Copa America final, Messi's 5th continental final, against Brazil at the Maracanã, the stadium of the 2014 walk, the hosts unbeaten at home in competitive play for years, every narrative gun loaded for one more heartbreak. Angel Di Maria, the man whose injuries had haunted the lost finals, chipped the opening goal from Rodrigo de Paul's long pass. Argentina, the flair nation, then defended for 50 minutes like a Uruguayan tribute act, Messi included. The sight of him tracking runners into his own box became the final's defining tactical image. The whistle blew 1-0, and the sport received one of its permanent photographs. Messi on his knees in the center circle, swallowed by teammates, weeping. The first senior international trophy of his life at 34, in the 28th year of trying, on Brazilian grass. The drought, Argentina's since 1993, his own since forever, ended in the one building that owed him most. He called it, immediately and repeatedly, the happiest moment of his football life. The country's 20-year prosecution collapsed overnight into something closer to worship. And within the team, the psychological load-bearing had quietly inverted. The burden was gone, the debt was paid, and everything that followed, the players from that camp insist, became possible that night. What followed was 18 months away. What followed was Qatar. 35 years old, a 36-match unbeaten Argentina behind him. One tournament left on the world's clock for the only line still blank. And it began with catastrophe. Saudi Arabia, 2-1, the biggest group stage upset in World Cup history by the ratings, and a month's worth of obituaries filed in an afternoon. What followed the Saudi defeat is why Qatar 2022 is, by broad consensus, the greatest individual tournament arc ever completed. Elimination effectively on the table for 6 straight matches, and in every single one, the oldest man on the pitch produced the decisive act. Mexico, scoreless and strangling. Messi's low drive from distance broke the game and visibly unfroze a terrified squad. Poland, control restored. Australia, the 1,000th career match goal. The Netherlands quarterfinal. The no-look disguised assist for Molina. An angle of past television needed 4 replays to explain. Then a penalty. Then the night's other revelation. The snarling, cussing, Topo Gigio taunting Messi, jawing at the Dutch bench, telling a World Cup winner on live television to move along. Fool. Argentina adored this final missing proof. He did feel the shirt, audibly. Croatia in the semifinal, a penalty, and then the tournament's signature solo. A 35-year-old taking Europe's best young defender on a full-field tour and depositing the assist like a signature. And then the 18th of December, Lusail. Argentina against France, the match this film's companion Dossier calls the greatest final ever played, and no one calls anything less. Messi's penalty. Di Maria's tears-in-motion second. 80 minutes of Argentine coronation. Then Mbappé's 97-second thunderclap, twice, and extra time balanced on a knife. Messi's poacher's finish in the second period of extra time. His second of the night, the World Cup within 11 minutes, answered by Mbappé's completed hat-trick from the spot. Penalties. Emiliano Martinez's save, Montiel's clincher, and the roar that circled the planet. The images from the next hour are already the sport's shared scripture. Messi hoisted on shoulders in the black and gold bisht, the trophy finally in those hands, kissed like something returned rather than won. The Buenos Aires crowds, millions, the largest public gathering in Argentina's history, turning a city into a single organism. He finished the tournament with 7 goals, 3 assists, the Golden Ball, the first man to win it twice, and scores in the group stage, round of 16, quarterfinal, semifinal, and final, the full house never done before. The debt of 2014, of the 4 finals, of No Siente la Camiseta, was not merely paid. It was converted in 1 month into the strongest single argument in the entire greatest of all-time file. The sport's most complete career, crowned by the sport's most dramatic possible ending. Except, and this is the fact this film opened with, the fact still unfolding 1 news cycle away from this narration. He declined the ending. A dossier requires an accounting. Here is the statistical estate as it stands this summer, grouped so the scale can register. The scoring estate, more than 850 career goals for club and country. with the mythic 1,000, counting the youth ghosts, a live actuarial question in Miami. The all-time records for a single club, 672 for Barcelona, and for a single European league, 474 in La Liga, plus its single-season record of 50, plus the calendar year record of 91 that broke a 4-decade mark. Argentina's all-time scoring record, 116 and counting, which now sits atop a further summit claimed 3 weeks ago. 13 World Cup goals, the most any man has scored in the tournament's 96 years. Add the international appearance record, 198 caps and counting, and the record 26 World Cup matches, and the sky blue column alone would constitute a Hall of Fame career. The creation estate. The half the goal counters forget. Football's all-time recorded assist leader, Sult's serious counts north of 380. The La Liga and Copa America assist records. The only player in history to lead a World Cup in both goals and assists across a single edition's knockout rounds while walking more than any forward in the field. The Qatar tracking data's favorite absurdity. The honors estate. 8 Ballons d'Or, 3 clear of any other man, won across a 16-year span, which is its own record of duration. 6 European golden shoes, 2 World Cup golden balls, the only double in the award's history. 40-plus major trophies, the most decorated career in the professional game's records. 10 Spanish leagues, 4 Champions Leagues, the Copa, the Finalissima, Olympic gold, the World Cup, the last man of consequence box, ticked in gold leaf, and the endurance estate, the one the historians rank first. Top 5 Ballon d'Or finishes across nearly 2 decades, a first Ballon d'Or in 2009 and an 8th in 2023, a summit-to-summit span in which entire great careers began, peaked, and ended underneath his. Skeptics of the spreadsheet make 2 honest points, and the ledger absorbs both. Penalties inflate all modern totals, remove every one, and the remaining open play mountain is still the largest ever recorded, and era adjustment cuts both ways. The defenses of the past were rougher. The fixture calendars, sports science, and opposition analytics of the present are crueler. What survives every adjustment is the shape no one else's numbers have ever made. The combination of peak height, the 2012 91, with plateau length elite production across 20 seasons, with breadth, the only all-time top 3 scorer who is also the all-time top creator. Statistically, there is no second example of this player. That is not a superlative. It is a description of the dataset. "20 years of argument have produced a folklore of anti-Messi claims that deserve, in a complete dossier, a proper audit. 5 of the hardiest, examine. Myth 1. He never did it on a cold rainy night in Stoke. The English shorthand for the claim that his greatness was greenhouse-grown, untested outside Barcelona's ecosystem. The audit? Transplanted at 34 into a colder league, he promptly led it in assists. Transplanted at 36 into a league of artificial turf and charter flight fatigue, he won its MVP twice, and his knockout record in away legs across Europe's hostile cathedrals, including that Champions League free kick through the Liverpool night, was elite for 15 years, busted with the honest footnote that the full career single league concentration remains the comparison's permanent asterisk in both directions. Myth 2. He disappears in big games. The audit laughs. Scorer in 4 Champions League finals won. 2 World Cup final goals plus a shootout conversion. Decisive contributions in every knockout round of the greatest tournament arc ever completed. The claim's kernel was always the 2014 to 2016 finals, where the fuller truth is the exhausted player carrying underbuilt teams to the exact doorstep. Busted. Myth 3. The fouls protected him. That modern refereeing built a greenhouse the old masters never had. Complicated, honestly, yes. The era whistles contact the 70s 8 raw. Also, yes, he was, for a decade, the most fouled player in Europe, targeted with rotational fouling schemes that referees openly struggled to police and missed remarkably little time to it. The protection and the targeting roughly cancel. What remains is the balance that made both moot. Myth 4. The system made him. The Xavi and Iniesta's machine would have crowned anyone. The audit points at the machine's other forwards, brilliant men with ordinary numbers, and at the counter-evidence, brutal elegance. The machine aged, dissolved, and vanished, and his output didn't. Then a different machine in sky blue was built expressly around him and won everything. Systems amplified him. Nothing about him required them. Busted. And myth 5. The reverse myth, his fandom's own. That he was effortless. The anti-Ronaldo, greatness without labor. The Dossier's whole first act refutes it. The nightly injections, the fitness rebuild of 2008, the free kick craft manufactured in his mid-20s, the 5 tactical reinventions. The effortlessness was the finish applied to the effort, confirmed only as illusion, which is, of course, the highest compliment craftsmanship can receive. Every long career condenses, in the end, to moments. The Dossier's official 10, in ascending order of what they meant. 10. The Boateng chip, Bayern 2015, the internet's chosen image of what he does to the elite. 9. The 5-goal Champions League night against Leverkusen 2012, peak output made visible. 8. The 2009 Rome final header. The smallest man scoring the biggest goal with the one tool he wasn't supposed to own. 7. The 2017 Bernabeu winner and the shirt held up to the whistling stand. The rivalry's mic drop. 6. The Getafe goal, 2007. Maradona's masterpiece reproduced by a teenager. The moment comparison became taxonomy. 5. The Quito hat trick, 2017. The night he carried a nation to a World Cup at altitude. The shirt question answered in thin air. 4. The Copa final at the Maracanã 2021. The first blue and white summit. The knees, the tears, the debt's first payment. 3. The Netherlands night 2022 Kemiras. Bobo, the fury the country had waited 20 years to hear. 2. The Lusail final in Tyre 2022. No single frame separable. The greatest match ever played wrapped around a career's final exam. Passed. 1. The Bisht and the Trophy. The 18th of December's last image, the sport's longest story arriving at its perfect final page. Honorable mentions overflow the vault. The 91st goal, the Burofax era defiance, the 500th, the Wembley 2-9-11 drive, last month's record 13th World Cup goal, rolled quietly inside an American far post. The vault stays open. That is the point of the next chapters. The iconography has refused, so far, to stop accepting deposits. 850 goals resist narration, but invite taxonomy. A field guide to the species for the completist. The slalom solo, the signature species. Possession collected deep, 3 to 6 victims. Finish low. Getafe 2007 is the holotype. The 2015 Copa final against Athletic and the 2022 Croatia semifinal assist variant prove the species survived every edition. The far post curler, the mass production species. Right half space, left foot. The shot the entire analytics industry crowned its most valuable recurring event. Specimens number in the hundreds and goalkeepers still attend the unveiling like mourners. The chip, the cruelty species, Boateng Neuer 2015 as apex specimen, the Albacete original as first record. Connoisseurs prize the subspecies dinked from implausibly tight angles. The free kick, the acquired species near absent before 2008. Industrialized after, the Liverpool 2019 65th minute missile, the USA 2016 record breaker, the Miami era weekly exhibitions, over 60 specimens, placing him among the dead ball elite of any era. The team goal terminus, the collective species, the 2006 to 2012 Barcelona passing symphonies that ended, note perfect at his boot. The 30-plus pass specimens live in coaching curricula. The header, the rare species protected status. Rome 2009 as the celebrated aberration. And the penalty, the workhorse species with the honest error rate, converter of the great majority, but the file rightly includes the misses. Chile 2016 skied kick that triggered a resignation. The 2012 Chelsea semifinal crossbar that swung a European season, plus the eccentric subspecies, the indirect pass penalty with Suarez, borrowed from Cruyff's museum, arrogance as homage. The taxonomy's finding is the point stat lines flatten. The collection's breadth has no rival specimen drawer. The century's other great goal scorers were specialists, headers and poachers' finishes, or thunderbolts, or penalties compounding. This drawer holds every species except the aerial, each in industrial quantity, each reproduced across 20 seasons, 2 hemispheres, and 5 tactical editions. Quantity was never the miracle. Coverage was. In the summer of 2023, with the Parisian exile expiring, and 500 million Saudi reasons on the table to join the sport's new gravity well, and a Barcelona reunion dangled by a club still doing arithmetic with ghosts, Messi chose the least legacy-obvious door: Major League Soccer, Inter Miami, David Beckham's pink startup in a temporary stadium. The football world read it as retirement with palm trees. The football world has spent 3 years being corrected. The sporting file first. He arrived to a last-place team and delivered the most cinematic debut window in the league's history. The League's Cup won within weeks, Miami's first trophy ever, on a run of free kicks and last-minute interventions that felt like a highlights compilation happening in real time, including a stoppage-time winner from a dead ball on debut night. The seasons since have stacked the domestic ledger: a record-breaking Supporters' Shield points season, an MLS Cup breakthrough, individual MVP hardware, while the man's output per minute has remained, into his late 30s, obstinately world-class. The 5th edition of the player, rationing everything but decision. The economic file is the bigger story, and it is genuinely without precedent. The deal itself rewired American sports commerce. Equity components, a slice of the streaming subscriptions his arrival detonated, revenue share architecture that made him less an employee than a franchise event. The measurable shock: season tickets across the league sold out on his schedule, away stadiums reconfigured for his visits, jersey sales instantly the league's history topper, franchise valuations, Miami's above all, multiplying, and a national audience for domestic soccer that 2 generations of marketing had failed to conjured. Analysts stopped comparing it to other transfers and started comparing it to Beckham's own 2007 arrival. Then stopped that too, because the numbers had left the comparison behind. The through line to this summer is direct. The World Cup, now underway on American soil, opens with the host nation's soccer economy running at a temperature 1 Argentine set. And the personal file, the quietest of the 3. Miami returned him to something Paris took: a home that feels chosen. The family rooted, the Rosario inner circle, Suarez among them, the old MSN brotherhood, partially reassembled in pink. Around him, the burden nowhere. Those who cover him daily describe the loosest, most openly joyful Messi of his professional life, which mattered competitively for one enormous reason: it kept him playing, sharp and willing, straight down the corridor that led to a decision no one dared assume. One more World Cup at home in the Americas, at 39. The dossier's commercial appendix, kept brief but kept, because the quiet man built one of the loudest economic engines in sports history, and its architecture is instructive. The endorsement spine is the longest-running individual deal in football. Adidas, signed in his teens after a famous early tug-of-war with Nike, escalated across 2 decades into a lifetime arrangement with a signature line, the German brand's answer to the Jordan model, and one axis of the Messi-Ronaldo duopoly's commercial mirror war with Nike. Around it, decades of blue-chip global contracts, an earnings profile that made him, in multiple audited years, the highest-paid athlete on the planet. And the modern multiplier: a social media presence in the 500 million follower class, where a single post carries broadcast network reach. The strategy throughout mirrored the man. No provocation, no politics, near zero scandal surface. The lowest risk, highest floor commercial profile in sport, priced accordingly. The Miami chapter converted the brand from endorsement asset to economic infrastructure, as Chapter 17 documented. Equity stakes, streaming revenue shares, a franchise and a league repriced around one arrival. What the structure pioneered: athlete as ownership class event rather than salaried star, is already the template every generational talents camp now demands. Agents call it, generically, a Messi deal, which is the highest form of trademark. Add the content estate, the documentary series industry that has turned his career into a permanent streaming genre, and the family office's expanding portfolio, and the post-playing economic question answers itself. The empire no longer requires the football. Which makes the fact that the football continues, 39, in the American heat, for none of these reasons, the brand's final, accidental masterstroke. The one asset money can't synthesize is the evidence that it was never the point. Edition 5 does not fly alone, and the machine around him this summer deserves its own inspection. Because the 2026 Argentina is a different animal from the band of bodyguards that won Qatar. Older at the spine, deeper in its prime, and built with actuarial honesty for the tournament where the captain contributes moments rather than minutes. The core carried over from Lusil has hardened into one of international football's great spines. Emiliano Martinez remains the penalty phase monster and the dressing room's chaos generator. His shootout resume now the most feared single variable in any level bracket. The midfield triangle that grew up in Qatar owns its prime now. Enzo Fernandez conducting, Alexis McAllister arriving, DePaul still running the captain's personal security detail, the role Argentine media long ago named his bodyguard shift, and ahead of them the succession made flesh. Julian Alvarez, the spider from Calcine, who has grown from Qatar's tireless deputy into the team's first-choice engine of goals. The man whose pressing and finishing let a 39-year-old walk his reconnaissance laps in peace. The fresher blood around them, the fullback generation, the newest attacking call-ups, arrived through a Scaloni process now so institutionalized that Argentina, historically the continent's most chaotic federation, has become its most boring. Same staff, same ideas, same standards, 8 years running. The tactical arrangement around the captain is the tournament's most openly discussed worst-kept secret. Argentina defend in a compact block engineered to require nothing of him without the ball, then route attacking possession through his right half space on his timetable. The 5th edition's habitat, maintained by a squad that grew up watching him and articulates, in every interview, the same sentence in different words: our job is to run so he can think. It is the Scaloni covenant, extended one last cycle. Its stress test is the same as Qatar's. When opponents survive the block and force a track meet, the captain's zone becomes the press target, and the team must win the resulting scramble a man light. Cabo Verde's extra-time scare previewed exactly that failure mode. The champions patched it live, as champions do. Whether the patch holds through the bracket's coming weather, potential France, the hosts, the old European ghosts, is the sporting question of Argentina's summer. The emotional question was settled years ago. This squad's stated tournament purpose, from its coach's first press conference here, has been one sentence long: send him out properly. Sports science has a genre for aging superstars, the decline curve, plotted with actuarial sympathy. His current file reads instead like an argument with the genre, so let the tournament's tracking data speak, verbatim. The costs of 39 are real and measured. Bottom percentile total distance among forwards. Sprint counts a fraction of his own Qatar numbers. Pressing action statistically decorative. Minutes managed with substitution windows planned before kickoff. That is the tax, fully paid, publicly visible. Now the other columns. Expected threat per touch. First among all players at this World Cup. Not among veterans, among everyone. Chances created per 90. Top 3 in the field. Pass completion into the penalty area. The hardest routing problem in football. First, by a margin the model's double-checked. Take-on success rate. Still above 80% in the smallest spaces on the pitch. The low center of gravity physics apparently exempt from the calendar. And the signature finding replicated from Qatar's dataset. The walking remains the working. His movement map shows the same reconnaissance grid. The same late-game cash-outs, the goals against Algeria and Austria, both arriving after the 70th minute. Both from zones his first half strolling had visibly surveyed. The analytics community's framing has itself become part of the story. He is the sport's first live case study in skill floor aging. Proof that when a player's game was never built on the attributes time collects first, time's collection agency arrives functionally empty-handed. The final entry in the file writes itself as a question the rest of this tournament will answer. The record 13th World Cup goal was rolled inside a far post off 2 steps of backlift and 35 minutes of accumulated map. There is, the data insists, at least one more of those in the drawer. Which brings the dossier to its live edge. The chapters still being written between this film's cut and your watching of it. The decision itself came in stages as his camp led it. The 2025 signals, the Scaloni consultations, the training load architecture built around one target, and finally the call-up that made him the first man ever named to 6 World Cup squads. Argentina arrived in North America as defending champions with the core of Qatar, matured around a captain, now employed an hour's flight from half the group stage venues. The away fixture World Cup, that is, in commercial truth, his second home tournament. The tournament file so far, facts as they stand. Goals against Algeria and Austria in the group stage, the second of which carried him past the 12-goal line that Pelé's heirs had guarded, making the all-time World Cup scoring record his alone at 13. The record international cap count extending with each match. The record 26th, then 27th World Cup appearance. And in the round of 32, a warning shot the champions survived, Cabo Verde. The tournament's romance story dragged Argentina to extra time before falling, a match after which both Messi and Scaloni publicly itemized the flaws, in the flat tone of men who remember that Qatar also began with a stumble. The champions advance. The bracket ahead holds in various weathers. Old ghosts. A possible France rematch has hovered over the draw sheet since December, and the actuarial fact nobody says aloud on Argentine television. Every remaining match is, with probability approaching certainty, the last of its kind. This film will not pretend to know the ending. It is being written in real time. One bracket away from the Ronaldo film running in parallel in the same June heat, it notes only what the whole dossier equips you to see. The 5th edition of the player, walking his reconnaissance laps in American stadiums, still banking maps, still cashing them. A country no longer prosecuting but savoring, every anthem filmed like a farewell. And a record book with exactly 1 page left that could conceivably matter, the one where a man wins the World Cup at 39. The sport's longest story has refused every offered ending for 20 years. It gets one more chance to choose its own. Every dossier ends with the subject's forward file. His is the sport's favorite guessing game, so here is what is actually known, and honestly framed. The playing horizon first. The Miami contract runs through the near term with structures. The club has confirmed the architecture, designed to flex around his choices. The 2026 World Cup was the last summit everyone agreed on, and every question past it receives the same answer he has given for years. Day by day, enjoying it, we'll see. The people around him note 2 data points the speculation industry underweights. He has never once announced a retirement he kept. The 2016 file proves it, and he has organized his entire late career around not being told when it ends. The honest forecast is no forecast. The 5th edition retires when the joy does, and the joy, on all visible evidence this summer, hasn't. The after-football file has firmer contours. Ownership. The Miami arrangement includes a pathway to an equity stake in the franchise. The Beckham route, institutionalized, making him, in probability, a club owner within the decade. Coaching. He has repeatedly cooled it. Those who know him doubt the press conference appetite, though the sport files the same doubt it once filed about Zidane. The Federation statesman role, the Rosario Academy investments, the family's expanding sports business portfolio, all live threads. And one symbolic door stands deliberately ajar. Newell's Old Boys, the boyhood club, where a stadium already bears his name and a romantic final chapter, even a ceremonial one, has been openly dreamed about on both sides for a decade. He has never quite said no. What is certain is only the shape. The most measured life in sports history will exit measurement on its own schedule. Quietly, with the family, probably announced in a sentence and never elaborated. The sport, which has spent 20 years learning to read his silence, will understand. Careers end, footprints don't. Before the verdict, the dossier's structural findings. 5 ways the sport itself is permanently different because this player happened. 1. He reweighted football's body politics. For a century, the game drifted toward athletes, taller, faster, stronger as destiny. The greatest player of the data era turned out to be the small one with the hormone prescription, and academies noticed formally. The post-Messi generation of technical small players, including the current Spanish heir this film's companion piece profiles, were scouted, retained, and protected by systems that, pre-Messi, cut them at 12. La Masia's most famous graduate functionally re-legislated youth development's height requirements. 2. He normalized the false nine and, more broadly, positional fluidity as a superstar's habitat. The 2009 hotel room experiment became a curriculum, the modern game's roaming, aggregating forward, the striker as system rather than station, descends in a direct line from that classico. 3. He broke the measurement instruments. The analytics movement grew up during his peak, and he functioned as its impossible calibration case. The outlier every model had to be checked against. The player whose numbers taught the industry the difference between a light and distributional anomaly. An entire generation of football data science learned its trade by trying and failing to find his comparable. 4. He redrew the sport's economic maps twice. First as half of the rivalry that turned 2 clubs' fixture into a global broadcast estate and individual brand value into a transfer market variable. Then, in Miami, as proof that a single player could reprice an entire national league. Football's commercial planners now model generational player events as an asset class. There is exactly one complete case study. And 5, the soft one that outweighs the rest. He re-encored the sport's idea of greatness to joy rather than force. The defining player of the century's first half was, by universal testimony, the one opponents most loved to watch. The one whose fouls drawn came with the fewest cheap falls, whose game the purists and the children agreed on. Whole national styles, a generation of number 10s, and the sport's self-image absorbed it. Ask the game's current young superstars, including the ones trying to beat Argentina this month, to name the poster on the bedroom wall. The answers are a census with one name. One more measurement the ledger chapter could not hold, because its units are human. The fandom, which long ago stopped behaving like sports support and started behaving like weather. The famous image is the plastic bag. In 2016, a photograph circulated of a 5-year-old in northern Afghanistan wearing a Messi shirt. His brother had fashioned from a striped plastic bag the name markered on the back. The image traveled far enough that the players' camp arranged real shirts and a meeting. And the episode became shorthand for a phenomenon sociologists of sport now study formally. Allegiance to a single distant human, in places with no televised league access, no Barcelona history, no Argentine diaspora. Belief propagated by clips, by word of mouth, by the universal legibility of what he does with a ball. The subcontinent is the phenomenon's capital. In Kerala, in Bangladesh, in pockets of Nigeria and Indonesia, Argentina's matches empty streets and fill them. 100-foot cutouts rise over Indian rivers, and during Qatar, Bangladeshi crowds celebrating Argentine goals went so viral that the Argentine Federation opened diplomatic-grade gratitude channels and the 2 governments exchanged official pleasantries over, in effect, a fandom. Rosario, meanwhile, has become a pilgrimage economy, Mural trails, the childhood home, the barrio pitch, a civic identity rebuilt around the boy the city's institutions once couldn't afford to keep. And the name itself became demography. Birth registries across half a dozen countries logged measurable spikes in Lionel and Thiago through the peak years, the fandom writing itself into census data. What distinguishes this weather system from ordinary stardom, the scholars note, is its texture. It is overwhelmingly affectionate rather than tribal. Opposing fans applaud him in enemy stadiums. The Bernabeu itself did it once, in 2005, a heresy its own stands still debate. The fandom's common thread across Kabul, Kerala and Kansas is not victory association, but something closer to protectiveness. The small one, wronged by biology and institutions, who kept the promise anyway. That is not a marketing demographic. It is the closest thing global secular culture has to a shared bedtime story. And it is why the tunnel walks of this 6th World Cup are being filmed, everywhere on Earth, like the last pages of one. Honest verdicts stress test themselves, so run the dossier's own counterfactual. The one Argentine broadcasters still cannot watch without covering their eyes. Extra time, Lusail, minutes from the end. Colo, Muani, clean through, and Emiliano Martinez's left leg. Move that ball 6 inches and France are champions, and this entire film's architecture shift. In that timeline, the file reads, 5 lost finals. The greatest club career ever, permanently footnoted. Couldn't do it with Argentina. Maradona's 1986 unanswered. The Ronaldo ledger's international column decisive. In some tellings, the Qatar Golden Ball, a second cruel golden ball, rhyming with 2014's walk. The GOAT debate stays permanently open at its oldest hinge. The No Siente la Camiseta prosecution reopens for appeals. The 6th World Cup, if it happens at all in that timeline, is framed as one last desperate audit rather than a champion's lap. 1 leg, 6 inches, and the sport's greatest story files as its greatest tragedy instead. The exercise earns its place for what it clarifies. First, the margins. This career's final meaning genuinely balanced, at the very end, on saves, posts, and penalties, a fact the deterministic language of greatness always launders out and shouldn't. Second, the resilience arithmetic. What actually distinguishes the real timeline is not that fortune finally paid. It is that he kept presenting the invoice. 4 finals of scar tissue, a resignation revoked, and at 35 he stood over a 5th finals first penalty and rolled it in. The counterfactual timeline required him to be somewhere. He was always going to be there. And third, the verdict's true anchor, even in the losing timeline, the style chapters, the ledger, the footprint on football itself. None of it changes. Lusail settled the story. The player was settled long before. Which is, perhaps, the cleanest way to say what this dossier believes. The World Cup was the ending the story deserved, not the evidence the greatness required. Football got lucky that its best ever argument also got its best ever final page. The page, remember, was 6 inches from reading differently. And the man walking American tunnels this week knows it better than anyone alive. "20 years of testimony have accumulated around this career like sediment, and a dossier should enter the strata into evidence. The witnesses summarized faithfully. The coaches who faced him arrived over the years at a shared genre, surrender, documented in advance. Ferguson's camp prepared 2 Champions League finals of containment plans, and later conceded that the 2011 Barcelona was the best team he ever met. It's number 10, the difference no plan survived. Mourinho, the career-long antagonist, the one defensive mind with real victories against those Barcelona sides, delivered the era's most quoted backhanded benediction in his own style. The problem, he told colleagues in substance, was not tactical. The problem was Messi. Klopp's version was cheerful fatalism after Anfield nights in both directions. Guardiola's, from inside, remains the canon. Don't write about him, watch him. Later upgraded, after facing him as an opponent, to the admission that he had seemed, some nights, uncoachable against. The player's stratum is more visceral. Defenders of two generations describe the same sensations in the same words. You know what's coming, and it doesn't matter. The recurring confession that marking him taught them the difference between their best and the best. Teammates converge on the quieter testimony. The training ground disbelief that never wore off. Veterans of a decade beside him still nudging each other at things the cameras missed. And the rival monarch's entry, given at the chessboard summit of their shared era and repeated in substance across years, the rivalry made both bigger. The respect was never performance. The last stratum belongs to the two ghosts. Cruyff, the sport's great theologian, ruled early and flatly that the boy was the best he had seen, and Cruyff did not traffic in seconds. And Maradona, witness, predecessor, family, left the testimony the whole country now recites, delivered years before Qatar made it prophecy. Watch him, love him, and don't compare him to anyone. The file rests. So, what did football just live through? The greatest of all time argument is a genre, and this film has fed it 2 hours of evidence without pretending the argument closes. Pelé's 3 World Cups and Maradona's 1986 hold their thrones in eras. This dossier cannot fully audit. The mirror from Chapter 11 holds his own unanswerable columns. What the evidence does close is narrower and larger at once. No career in the sport's history combines this peak, this duration, this breadth of skill monopoly, this documentary completeness. Every match of the era measured, filmed, adversarially scrutinized, and this ending. No one else's story contains its own perfect redemption arc. The country that wouldn't love him, the 4 lost finals, the resignation, the return, the Maracana Lusail. If the greatest ever question is a court case, Qatar was the closing argument. If it is a story contest, it ended by acclamation. The dossier's own verdict prefers the boy with the syringe. Every institution that was supposed to carry him failed early. The clubs that wouldn't pay, the country that wouldn't claim him, eventually even the club that raised him. What carried instead? A family, a napkin's worth of one scout's conviction, and the single most durable relationship between a human being and a ball that the sport has recorded. Everything in this film, the records wall, the tactical revolutions, the economic weather systems, the 200 caps, compounds from a 4-year-old in Rosario whose grandmother insisted, and a 13-year-old who injected his own legs nightly and told no one at school. He is out there this week, one more time, walking his laps in the American heat, reading defenses like weather, 39 years old, world champion, record holder of every record that matters, still the smallest man on the pitch. Whatever happens between this narration and the tournament's last whistle, the file assembled here does not change. It only, possibly, gains a final page nobody would dare write as fiction. The dossier remains open. It has earned the right. A closing image, because this film began with one. Somewhere in America this week, before a match, there is a moment the broadcast cameras have learned to find. The teams lined up in the tunnel, and the smallest man in it, front of the line, captain's band on, eyes down, saying nothing. Around him, opponents half his famed sneak glances. Behind him, teammates who were 7 years old for the Getafe goal. Above him on the concourses, tens of thousands of shirts with one name, worn by children who cannot remember football before him, and by their parents, who can, and who know exactly what that means. He will walk out. He will stroll through the first minutes while everyone else sprints, reading, mapping, banking. And, at some point, the 68th minute, the 81st, the map will get cached, and an entire stadium, both sets of fans, will rise for the same half-second of recognition the sport has been rising for since 2005. That thing again, the thing that never stopped being surprising. However, many walks remain. 1, 4, a final one in Rosario years from now. The dossier closes on its only unqualified finding. Football has had better athletes, louder champions, and one or two rivals for the throne. It has never had anything it agreed on more. They measured everything, every pass, every meter, every goal for 20 years. The numbers all agree, and the numbers were never the point.